Dr. Aaron, I will pass it to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Erica. All of you attending today, you met me last week when we talked about daily population rounds. I am the director of veterinary programs for Best Friends Animal Society. And let me just start with a little bit of housekeeping and then we'll do some introductions. Of course, we've prepared some topics and some questions to kick things off today with our amazing group of panelists, but we can take this discussion in any direction. We want this to be meaningful and helpful for all of you as you're really working through what population management, what population rounds looks like in your shelters. So please ask questions. Use the Q&A box for questions that you want to pose to the panelists, and I'll monitor this and bring those questions up to pose to the panel. And then go ahead and continue to use the chat to introduce yourselves, if you have comments, to interact with other attendees, or if there's any questions that our panelists pose to you. So use the chat box for those sorts of things. Okay, and with that, I will kick it off. We'll start with some introductions of our panelists. And so as Erica said, April's having some tech difficulties. I'll let her introduce herself when she is able to log on. I will then kick it to Jackie Hernandez. Tell us who you are and what organization you're from, current and or past, whatever feels relevant to our population management conversation.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. Howdy, everyone. My name is Jackie Hernandez. I am the VP of Shelter Operations and Strategy here in Omaha, Nebraska, with the Nebraska Humane Society. Our supervisor decided to join us today. I'm not really sure why, but he's here for the ride. So this is Bay. He originated from one of the shelters I worked in Texas. And so I've worked across multiple shelters, both in the US, Canada, and Mexico. So we'll pass it on to Taryn.
Hi everyone, my name's Taryn Tall. I work at the Animal Foundation, which is located in Las Vegas. We take in about 26,000 animals a year, so we're a pretty large facility. Prior to my work at the Animal Foundation, I also worked with Best Friends Animal Society for about 5 years and was fortunate enough to work at shelters across the country. And those shelters had a variety of different populations. So I've seen quite a few different shelters and how they function. Very excited to be here today, and I will go ahead and pass to Shelby.
Hi everyone, I'm Shelby Lawrence. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for All Kind Animal Initiative based in Abilene, Texas. We started contract with the city of Abilene at the beginning of 2023, so we managed the current facility and had a new facility built in October of 2024. It's been going really well. We average probably 6,000 to 6,500 animals a year on intake. So I started out as a volunteer and I've been in Abilene all of my time and I just love it here. It's my community. So I'll pass it to April.
Let's see. And I think April still hasn't been able to join. Yeah, so I'll keep an eye out for when April is able to join. So the question that I would kick this off with, and we'll let each of the panelists that's here weigh in, but I would ask, so can you share your favorite or your number one strategy, process, or program that you have really found to be the most effective or most impactful for population management? I'm going to start with posing this question to Jackie.
Thank you. So I think what really day to night shifted us to really make impactful, effective, data-driven decisions was implementing daily rounds, not just one specific team, but a group of us within different departments to really consistently, collaboratively work together. We went from doing this hard work every day together so that we could identify each animal, look at them in the eyes, and basically say, what can we do to get you out of here? And because of that, we were able to take our meeting that used to be about what animal do we have to euthanize next over to how can we get you out of here and what do you need from us to do that. I think that really was the biggest, best thing we could have done. It was a lot of work, but now that we've kind of got our routine down, we're able to quickly identify an issue or problem or maybe something that might become a bottleneck and be able to collaborate on a life-saving effort to make a positive change.
What I really love, Jackie, that you said there was just that shift from like making these tough decisions, making euthanasia decisions, to that shift, this like real life-saving outcomes focus. And I think that really speaks to like the culture at the organization when we make that shift.
Yeah, definitely did.
All right, so same question, top strategy process program, something that you found to be most effective. And I'm gonna pose that to Taryn.
Thank you. So, my strategy that I think I would choose is addressing fear, anxiety, and stress early to try and prevent behavioral decline in animals. So that looks like a lot of different things for us. There's no one, program or tip that really can tie that in. It's a lot of little things. So we're looking at an animal's behavior prior to arrival to the shelter, whether that's someone who's found a lost pet, an owner surrender, whether that's just any way that they may come into us through animal protection services, looking at them on intake, gathering in any information that we see, kind of flagging those ones who might need us the most from the very beginning so our behavior team can start those interventions. And I will say daily population rounds really helped us with that as well. Prior to doing those rounds, it was mostly our behavior team that we had who was going through and putting eyes on the animals, which was wonderful that we had that team doing it, but we weren't always seeing the full picture. The animals were becoming very accustomed to those team members. They were very skilled. We love the team, but we were noticing that some of those behaviors were very different for adopters or fosters who were walking through the building. So as part of our daily population rounds, we're able to have a lot more people have eyes on those animals. And similar to what Jackie said, instead of waiting for them to be so far behaviorally deteriorated to where we are making euthanasia decisions, we're wanting to jump in quickly to see what interventions we can start and what we can do to help them find placement in a positive manner prior to that decline.
It's so important. That's when we talk about length of stay, that's one of the biggest things that we talk about is that behavioral decline, and it just results in this sort of vicious cycle, right, of them staying longer. So important. Let's see. I will kick it to same question. Favorite strategy process program, Shelby. How's that going in Abilene? What's your favorite process?
Yeah, I think so. Just being very proactive and efficient in moving the animals through the shelter, the flow. First thing in the morning, we go in and we check our admissions intake area and see how many animals we have back there. Our cutoff for dogs is usually 21. And then we also check to see what owner surrenders we have coming in, singles or litters. And the first thing we do, we usually try to have at least 3 people do the walk through the shelter, but at least 2. If it's just me, I go get started. And it's really to see what open kennels do we have, who has been adopted and needs to be re-co-housed with each other. And that way we can go ahead and start moving dogs to the open kennels, clean that one, move the next one out. So we're not re-cleaning a kennel. So that space, it takes a little bit in the morning, but then everybody knows like, hey, we have 5, we're getting 5 out of the admissions area today, and then we're full up. So once we do that and we get everybody moved, we do the co-housing testing, then we're able to kind of make a second round and we go through and, see like, okay, who needs to be dog tested and behavioral dogs, who needs enrichment for today, to pass that to volunteers to make sure they're getting enrichment. Then we also do our urgent list. Once we make that urgent list for the day, we're going back into those profiles and saying, okay, hey, look, whoever dropped this dog off, they said they want to be notified. We need to call them now. We have somebody who's interested in fostering, call them. Any known owner information, we call again. Even if we called last week, we're calling again, just to try and make sure we can open up as much space as possible. And some days we do know like, hey, we're only going to be open to emergencies today. And our animal control officers, obviously, they're still going to be bringing them in. Other days we have public intake open from 11 to 2. So we can leave it open if we know, well, we have about half the space in the admissions, we can go ahead and open that to the public again.
There's so many amazing things with kind of what you outlined in your process, Shelby. And I guess I would even back up a little bit and say, and just call out like one of the themes that we heard from essentially from everybody was daily population rounds. And, you know, I think that's important, right? We devoted an entire session to that, but
Yeah.
you're hearing from all of these folks, even as sometimes daunting as it can be to get rounds launched, it is this mechanism to be able to manage your population. And for example, we heard from Shelby, it allows us to be proactive, both for individual animals that we have to figure out an outcome for, or have to figure out how to move them through or what they need, but it also allows us to like plan for the whole population, the things that we know are coming. What are the, you know, the plan for that day's intake or that sort of thing. Or if we can flex and we have a little bit of wiggle room, like then that's great. And that's how we can really leverage that. So I love all of that. Well, you know, when I start to think about these like individual steps, what do you need today? What are the things that we can do to get you out of here when we're thinking about individual animals? As a big process, right? We talked about pathway planning in some of our earlier sessions. And so I want to ask the panel just to share more about what specifically pathway planning looks like in their organizations. And so I'll start with Jackie. What does pathway planning look like? And that can be pathway planning at the point of intake, maybe even pathway planning before the point of intake. But what does that look like in Nebraska?
Yeah, so for the Nebraska Humane Society, we see just shy of 12,000 animals a year, cat and dog anyway. And so for us, it's imperative for our life-saving efforts that we start from the second we know an animal potentially might be coming in. So we do, after our rounds, we have our pathway manager who her whole job in life, I feel, is that she's doing just that. So she is reviewing data with us. We're trying to forecast based off the data that we have, when we should anticipate higher intakes, when we should anticipate lower intakes. We start working with individuals when someone puts in a request. You know, one of the questions we ask is there any resource we could provide you to help you keep your pet? And with that, we're able to divert a lot of animals where maybe they thought the best and safest place was our shelter, but when in reality, it could potentially be that they can stay home with the family that they know and love. So we do all kinds of preventative measures from the beginning. And then once an animal is here, what is the best way we can get you out of here safely? Is that a transport because we know of a partner that would be interested in you? Is that we put you straight into the adopt floor because you're already altered? We ask questions to finders like, can you foster this animal if I vaccinate for you? So by the time they come back, they have vaccines on board, and we're able to reduce the risk of exposure to any illnesses, both for the pet that they found and the pets in our shelter. And then, you know, of course, are you interested in adopting? You get first dibs if an owner does not reclaim, which tends to sway people over sometimes too. So our goal is to never say no to anyone in need, but also keeping in mind what our capacity for care is. Just because we might have an empty kennel does not mean that we have the capacity, because as we know, we can fill kennels all day, every day. So we just try to holistically look at everything and how can we best, most efficiently move animals that are both in our system and about to come into our system.
One thing I want to call out is, so you mentioned NHS has a position that's essentially dedicated to that population management. And I think that is amazing. And it is something that for large shelters, we definitely recommend something like that. Do you have any sort of words of wisdom for shelters that may not be large enough to dedicate an entire position?
Yeah. So this is something that we found even before we had the position, we already had advocate volunteers doing this for us. So we had a lot of volunteers who know the dogs better than some staff because they're walking them 3 times a day. And so they'll notice behavioral changes, health decline. They'll notice if when they take them on outings, you know, they're always consistently like, hey, you know what, they really enjoyed this. So we are huge advocates for allowing your volunteers to collect data for you that maybe your staff don't have the bandwidth for, and then taking that information and promoting adoptions outside of our bandwidth, right? So doing a virtual foster, meaning that the volunteer has taken this animal on and their sole purpose now is to try to adopt out this animal via social media or word of mouth. And so we will even say, if you can find this animal an adopter, we will waive the adoption fee. And that tends to get people to get going. And just, holding our staff accountable. They know our animals so well. So being able to see, even if you're just quote unquote, just a kennel staff member, right? You hold so much power and knowledge in the kennels that you're caring for and the animals you care for within your kennels. So we always advocate that our staff just let us know what they're observing. Is somebody struggling? Is there someone doing really well? What information can we take that we can help, move that information to help that animal get out of our shelter quicker?
One of the things that you mentioned that I love so much is really this culture at an organization, right? That it's everyone's job to think about like what do we need to do to get animals out, and that's like top of mind for everyone. And so I really love that. Welcome, April. So April Moore has just been able to join us. Hooray for tech issues. So I'll actually, now that April's joined us, I'll let her introduce herself. And April, we're talking about pathway planning specifically. But I'll let you introduce yourself, and then if you want to, discuss pathway planning and what you've seen be successful in organizations.
Yeah, thanks so much. And my apologies for the tardiness. I'm April Moore. I'm a senior manager on the Learning Advancement team at Best Friends. And prior to joining Best Friends just a few years ago, I spent about 2 decades in the field, working primarily in municipal agencies, but did some time. That sounds awful, doesn't it? Spent some time working in nonprofits. My role within the different agencies that I worked with was primarily externally focused engagement programs like field services, intake programming, volunteers, things of that nature. So sort of anything that was rooted in bringing the public in and connecting them to the shelter, that was sort of the role I fulfilled in these different organizations, and worked to strengthen the bond between community and shelter so that we could protect that human-animal bond while also acknowledging and improving public health and safety.
April, I gave everybody the chance to sort of weigh in with like what their top strategy or program was when it comes to population management. And so I'll go ahead and pose that question to you. What is your favorite strategy or program? What have you found to be the most effective or the most important thing?
Yeah, I got my start in a large municipal shelter in Central Texas. I got my start out of Austin. And one of the things that was so instrumental, I think, to our success in not only managing the needs of our population, but achieving high levels of life saving, was ensuring that all of our systems were built upon this, or built within this time-based decision-making philosophy. And so the idea being that from the moment the animal engages with our shelter, whether that's before the door or at our door, we had actionable steps to support their need, and had time expectations around how those actions were going to happen, who was going to be engaged, and what was going to happen next, so animals didn't get lost in the system or sit in the system too long before we discovered that maybe there's something else we need to support them with to help them on their journey.
One of the things that I heard in what you were saying, and I want to like pull this thread a little bit. It sounds like you're advocating for a process and a system. And I think that sometimes can help us avoid just individuals slipping through the cracks. And so can you speak to that a little bit more, like this idea of what that system could look like, or why that might be advantageous versus some, like, we can go on rounds and we can identify animals that have been here a long time, but what can we do in a more proactive way, and what can we do in a way so we don't miss animals?
Yeah, so the idea of this, building everything into this time-based system, or using that philosophy to sort of create a system that supports the pets within the shelter, it's really rooted in this idea that the shelter operates as a system. And so nothing happens really in a silo. And so it's about ensuring that we know what an intervention needs to look like for a pet. We know how we're going to support that pet. We know who's going to support that pet. We know the time frame in which that support's going to happen. So take, for example, if you've got a dog that comes in and he's very shut down. In sort of a time-based decision-making structure, you already have a system in place so that the caretaker that's supporting that animal, the intake individual that's supporting that animal, they already know what they need to do in the time frame in which they need to do to support the needs of that animal as it's being presented. So that intake person, instead of just saying, okay, well, I've completed the intake and now he's off to the next process, animal care can go take him and get him set up in a kennel. That intake person is saying, okay, foster, I'm flagging you. Now in the next 24 hours, we need to look for a quieter space or maybe a foster off-site or what have you. And then foster saying, okay, I've got 24 hours now to start pleading out to folks to see if I can get support for this animal's specific needs or whatever it looks like. Like the time frame looks different based off resources, based off shelter size, based off the depth of programming, but that's just an example where, if foster's got it over the next 24 hours and foster can't find somebody, then foster says, okay, I'm flagging it back to whoever's next in the inline, supervisor or our rounds team, because now we need to brainstorm other options for this pet because we need to figure out ways to support him so he doesn't sort of sit and wait in need.
So I think that just that idea of like, what are those levers that we can pull for individuals, that brings me to my next question, which I was going to pose to Shelby. And that was really when it comes to those effective strategies for those individuals that either have spent more time in our shelter already, like maybe have a longer length of stay, or that we, even better, if we're able to be proactive about it, that we know are at risk for having that longer length of stay. So Shelby, can you share some of those effective strategies for all kind for some of those at-risk animals?
Yeah, and I think we all know it tends to be some of the bigger blocky head dogs that stick with us a little bit longer. We definitely keep an eye on them if they're coming up on that 30 days, or especially if they're past the 30 days and we're seeing them decline a little bit in the kennel. The easy ones, I think that everybody can kind of do at a shelter is if you have a good volunteer base, you make that list for them. These are the dogs that absolutely need enrichment and need to get outside. So take them out for a walk, to a play yard if you have one, play with toys, just interact with them. And then also first come, first serve up for fosters. And we have a good foster that's open. We need to get them out first. We do have a few programs. So we do a doggy day out program that is one of the best ones to get dogs out into the community. So they get their adopt me collar, leash on, and they get taken out into the community. We have a list of businesses like Home Depot, different stores, Lowe's, that allow dogs to come into the building. And then also restaurants that are pet friendly, have outdoor access. And we give them that list so they have places to go with the pet and really just put that face out there. They can see how this dog is behaving. Typical, in the shelter, a lot of times they're being barrier reactive, so they just don't show well. But you get them out into the community and they're like, oh, this dog walks great on a leash and it's knows how to sit already. People are really drawn to that. And so we also do a shelter pet rep program. So we have businesses that will sponsor adoption fees for our pets, and we'll take them to the business, take pictures, and then it gets cross-shared across social media. And a lot of times our sponsored dogs through the pet rep program get adopted within a week. It's just really getting that out there. Contact a radio station or TV station. A lot of them are willing to do a promotional once a week. And so you typically send them length of stay dogs as well. Just as much public, like getting them out in the public view is the best way to get them out of the shelter, I think. And it gives them the enrichment they need for being there so long.
Yeah, it's a win-win for so many of those dogs. And we know these are the dogs that are, for a lot of us, that are getting stuck. And so it's great for them and it's great for actually getting them out. And so April, I'm gonna kick it back to you again. You know, when we're thinking about this population of at-risk animals that are at risk of, you know, staying longer in our shelters, that sort of thing. Talk to us about the outcome side for that particular group of pets.
Yeah, so it's important to understand what animals are at risk in your facility. Well, it's important to understand what's at risk of coming in, but also what's at risk of staying a long time and what's at risk of potential euthanasia, because sometimes those are all very different things, right? And then you want to build programs that are going to support those animals' specific needs. A lot of times you'll see some commonalities between the animals that are holding for longer periods of time in your shelter. Like Shelby had just mentioned, like for them, you know, blocky-headed dogs kind of tend to like hang out for a little longer than they'd like. And so I think again, Shelby did a great job of sort of teeing this up for me, honestly, is, you know, they worked very intentionally to build out programming for those populations of animals to increase their exposure, to develop relationships within the community that you maybe wouldn't have just sort of naturally come upon. Like you wouldn't be like, oh, well, you know, I'm just gonna like go figure out who all the dog friendly businesses are and like, you know, take all of our dogs out for a doggy day out spin. But being intentional in that way and building program depth, so building the capacity to be able to match the need in the shelter is really important to be able to move those animals through the system. And ideally, you would have program depth built that exceeds your need. But it's also important to remember that over time, what is at risk in your shelter is going to shift. So as your community needs change, the animals that come into your shelter or at risk of entering your shelter change as well. And so it's something that you have to be constantly evaluating. And so you don't want to stay stagnant, if you will, in sort of where you're looking for opportunities and where you're looking for partnerships and where you're looking for growth opportunities.
So I'm going to open it up to our other panelists here because I think this is just such an important topic. So Taryn, tell us about what are some other strategies that you all at the Animal Foundation have specifically used for this particular group of at-risk individuals?
Yeah, so at the Animal Foundation, we have a weekly meeting with our leadership team where all organizational leadership for operations, we meet and we go through and talk about animals who have been identified as being at risk. And again, that could be at risk of staying in the shelter for a long period of time. It could be at risk of further medical or behavioral decline or at risk of humane euthanasia. We kind of look at all those different categories separately, similar to what April said. But what we do with that, we have any of our staff members are able to open up a what we call a case rounds memo. So if someone does see that an animal may not be responding well to interventions that are happening, maybe they're continuing to decline medically or behaviorally despite extra enrichment, despite medical treatment, or if they just notice that they've been in the shelter for a little bit of time, we do have a shelter pathway supervisor as well. So she is also wonderful at kind of flagging a lot of those animals for us and reviewing our population. But our behavior and medical teams will routinely add animals to that. Our adoptions team has added quite a few to it from their interactions that they've had with animals. But what we really want to look at for all of these populations are what interventions can we start for them to help them find that positive placement. So that might be, are we seeking foster placement for them? If we've been seeking foster and haven't been successful, are we looking at transfer organizations who might be able to take them in? Are they receiving extra enrichment? Do they have a good photo? Do they have a good biography that's on our website? We rely a lot on our volunteers for those as well. So these are some of the checklist items on here are great for our volunteers to help plug in and support us with, but we also use all different teams. We kind of all have an item we're responsible for during these meetings, and it rotates who has what responsibility, and we'll take those back, So it may be today you're on About Me's and photos. Next week, you might be helping elevate animals from foster to transfer, helping make sure that all their information is in there, that we've got good information, positive information about the animals as well. A lot of times we focus on those negative behaviors that we see or the negative medical that we have. We will want to be transparent and share all of that, but we forget to put those positive pieces in. And that's something that I think is so important when we're trying to advocate for animals, is making sure we have their whole picture there that's available to be seen. And with that, we also do a lot of marketing on our social media as well. So we want to be transparent with our community about which animals are at risk. So we've got an at-risk portion of our website that just launched in the last year that we're really excited about. And that helps us share out with our community what are those 3 different breakdowns of animals, who is at risk of potential humane euthanasia, who's just at risk of staying longer in the shelter and might need some extra help from you, and then who are ones who are starting to struggle that we've kind of pinged as someone who needs a little bit of extra support. That way our community knows how to best help and support us, because with taking in 26,000 animals a year, we often have 500 plus dogs in our facility at any time. So it can be overwhelming to know who needs the most help, who needs the most support. So having our teams kind of help identify those animals and share them out has been really, really wonderful in getting them the help that they need.
Some of the things that I heard you say, or threads that I want to pull, or things I want to highlight, is just like you mentioned at the very end again, but this idea that like essentially multiple groups, staff, volunteers, like everybody is contributing to add to this, essentially this list, so that animals don't slip through the cracks. But it speaks to that urgency, like as a culture at the organization. And so I think that's really important. Another thing that you mentioned in there was, you have assignments for various roles and duties that need to be done to make sure that these things are happening, so that the steps are being taken, all of these steps on the various pathways. And I love that idea of really building that accountability into the process, right? And so I think that's really important. I think the last thing that I'll highlight, I talked about this like a tiny bit in last week's webinar, but it's just to clarify, there's, we do daily population rounds every day, ideally, where we're walking around the shelter. And then separate from that, but that in a complementary way, right, we also have these, I'm envisioning, and so Taryn, correct me if this is not the case, but a separate weekly, bi-weekly, whatever that looks like, collaborative conversation that really happens like in a meeting room, where you dive into those individuals and you have reports accessible, you can look into their individual records, but it's both, and they're separate, but they're complementary to each other. Did I capture that accurately? Is that kind of what you're doing?
Yeah, you did. So we added this portion of our population review to our weekly operations meetings that we have, since we had trouble finding another time to be able to do it. So since we were all in the same room to give our kind of operational updates to each other and troubleshoot, we just added this as a part of that meeting. So it's a 2-part meeting, but it makes sure that all the right players are in the room. And you're right, it's separate from anything that we do with our daily population rounds, but they do tie together quite a bit. We often will add animals from those reviews onto our rounds tracker. So as we're doing population rounds, we make sure that we check in on those animals, knowing that, hey, they're probably going to need a little bit of extra eyes on them. So we'll have the team who's doing daily rounds kind of give more observations than they typically would on those specific animals, so we can get updated information and notes on them for when we're having the further discussions.
I love that. And one of the things we say about rounds, when organizations are concerned that they won't have time to do rounds, it's, you can likely replace something that you're already doing. And so you're just taking a moment to have extra eyes on those animals. So it's not like a separate walkthrough that you have to do to look at those animals. So I really like that. All right. Last, I will kick it to Jackie. What are some strategies in Nebraska that you find effective for your at-risk animal populations?
Yeah. We are huge advocates for starting kind of like casework, if you will, from the moment we know an animal potentially is going to come into our shelter. So I know I touched on this briefly, but one of the things that really shifted for us culturally, first internally and then externally, was we wanted to have a real raw conversation with our community about what capacity for care was, And again, an empty kennel does not mean we have the capacity for care. It just means that someone else is going to fill that really quickly. But capacity for care looks like, you know, how much staff do we have on board? Who called in sick? We all know those woes. What does funding look like? What projects do we have coming up? I mean, there's a lot of things that go into capacity besides the number of empty kennels you may or may not have in your facility. And so once we started having that conversation internally, we then shifted it to talking to individuals who were coming into our shelter who, you know, they feel as though they're doing the right thing by surrendering their pet because they work 8-hour days. And so their pet is in their kennel for 8 hours. And we were just having, again, those honest conversations with them about what that would mean for their pet. And sometimes, you know, if it was an animal that maybe behaviorally had enough challenges that maybe they are now a risk in our community, we have that conversation with them as well. No one really wants to have those conversations, but I think once we started having them, we were able to build a trust with the community that didn't exist before, or maybe the narrative was, oh, well, the shelter will deal with it. So really being able to have those conversations from the second we could potentially have the animal coming into our shelter, explaining what could happen if they're at our shelter. And, you know, of course, we do everything in our power to guarantee a positive outcome, but we can't, it's not 100% guarantee. And so when we did this shift with our community, it helped us better explain why the animals that were at our shelter were at risk and what they could do to help us, whether that was fostering, adopting, doing a dog stay out. You know, different people have different bandwidths of capacity that they could provide. So again, just that one natural conversation that at first is a little bit icky to talk about. No one loves to talk about euthanasia, at least I don't. But it was a necessity for us, and that really helped bridge the gap with the community, and make those conversations go from something no one really wants to talk about to being a proactive conversation about what we can do to help this animal get out of our shelter alive.
We could have an entire discussion, I feel like, on just transparency with our communities. And there's so much of that I really love. I think it's a great example of when we are able to be transparent and talk about what our challenges are, right? Whether that's individuals or the bigger picture, our population, or our capacity, right? The community is more equipped and better able to step up and help. And by and large, this is what we see. As tough as these conversations can be, or as scary, I think, as it can be to sometimes share some of this, right? When we do it, by and large, the community steps up and is there to help, but we have to tell them what the challenges that we're facing. I think the other thing that I love about what you said, Jackie, was just thinking about this in terms of this transparency. It's, again, like many things that we do, it's both at the individual level, as that person is either calling or showing up with that one pet, but it's also at the population level. Like, what is our shelter's capacity? And I'm sure many of us have seen just examples of shelters that are now have some sort of capacity meter on their website, something that says like, hey, we're at 101% capacity for dogs right now, like, and you can help us by doing these things, right? So engaging with them. I just want to throw out again for any of you attendees on there, don't forget, like, we do have our question and answer box up. If you want to pull on the threads of any of these things that our panelists are talking about, feel free to drop some questions in that Q&A box, and I can sort of pose those questions. I think so. The next sort of big topic that I wanted to address was really digging into some more of these obstacles and challenges. I think for a lot of organizations, folks understand the importance of this population management, understand these like high level ideas about rounds and pathway planning, but there are obstacles or challenges when it comes to getting things started or when it comes to maintaining them. And so I'll pose to the panelists, like, what was your biggest challenge that you faced in your organization with the implementation of some of these programs, whether that's population management generally, pathway planning, rounds, and what were some of the things that you did to overcome that? I'll start by kicking it to Taryn.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dr. Aaron. I will say when we first started doing our daily population rounds, we had a vision of grandeur that we would not have to do any follow-up afterwards, that we would do it all in real time. We thought we would be bringing our laptops along with us and just putting in anything we needed to do as we came across it. We learned very quickly that was not going to be the case. Very quickly was about 5 minutes into the first time that we started doing rounds. But we pivoted. We made a quick Google spreadsheet. We all had our cell phones on us, and we instead started popping things into this spreadsheet so we could go back and do our follow-up. When we do our daily rounds, we typically have anywhere from about 40 to 60 items on average that are follow-up items. So we're able to kind of go in, get everything added onto the spreadsheet. And then after we do that physical walkthrough, we're going through and doing the action items. We also learned that for our organization, it wasn't going to work to have the same people who were doing that daily walkthrough do the follow-up items. So we kind of split it into 2 categories. So all of our different teams and departments who are coming in to support, they either have one of 2 assignments. They're either doing the physical walkthrough that day, or they're helping with the spreadsheet and the action items, the follow-up tasks. So we had to learn how to make sure we were including the right information on that spreadsheet so that the people who were doing the follow-up had all the information they needed. So it took us a little bit of trial and error to really get there. Were we giving too much information? The answer is never, or not enough, which was often what was happening. But with that, we kind of found a flow that works for our team now. It took some trial and error. So if you are following, a step-by-step guideline, just understand that you might have to be flexible and make some changes. Every organization is going to be different. So don't be afraid to kind of color outside the lines to make it work.
Like so many things we do, right? Like we're the ability to be flexible and to pivot. We do it every day, every hour, every minute in shelters, right? And so rounds should not be any different. So I love that. Let's see. So more just obstacles and challenges and solutions for those. So April.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've encountered sort of time and time again with, it poses a pretty significant barrier to pathway planning is when you get full. Like when you get full, things stop, right? It sort of halts systems. And so one of the solutions for that, or the strategies to ensure things stay moving even when we're reaching thresholds within our kennels that are higher than what we'd like, is developing like a space management response plan. Like when you are reaching crisis levels, so you know what to do, right? And so what a space management response plan is it's basically a strategy within pathway planning. Because like I said before, like if you're not managing that space, then things are going to stall, and that's going to disrupt the rest of your pathway planning strategy. And what happens from an animal's perspective is animals that weren't previously at risk become at risk because everybody's stalled, right? And so if we utilize the space management response plan as a strategy, under that pathway planning umbrella, what we're looking at is developing a plan of the different levers we're going to pull at different points in time based off what our percentage of kennel inventory is to our kennel space availability. And what that looks like across organizations can be very different because shelters have different resources, right? They have different things available to them. So you may find that, so what this kind of looks like is what you may find is like at a point of space neutrality, right? Like you've got space, you're good to, you're good just operation as normal. You don't have to change anything. Everybody just goes about their day doing all the things that they do to save lives. But you might find that, you're at 85% of your space availability, and you've defined that in your organization as an urgent level need. And then once you're at that urgent level need, you have all of these different tasks that teams across your organization engage in. So you might have your field services staff calling stray pet finders to see if maybe with some support and tools they can hang on to the dog that they found and help reunite it with its owner. And folks may say no, and that's okay, but some people will say yes, right? And so it's an important step in the process. You may say, okay, well, Foster, we'd like to go ahead and send out an emergency plea to get folks in the shelter to kind of provide us some relief. And the magic of this plan, I think, is that not only does it involve teams and individuals across your organization, it helps everybody show up for life-saving, right? Everybody's on the same page, but it gives people the tools they need and the autonomy to just act. They don't have to figure it out in time. They just know we've met this threshold. This is what I'm going to do to get us back to that place of neutrality where we can operate as business as usual.
One thing I want to highlight, you mentioned this when you were sort of giving your example, April, was, the levers that we can pull and actions that we can take and you said 85%. So like when we're at 85% capacity, and I want to call that out. It's back to this theme of like being proactive with population management. It's like, let's not wait until we are at 100% or 105%. It's recognizing like, we know there's going to be intake coming in. Let's act before we actually are at that like critical mass of animals.
Yep.
And I think the other piece that I wanted to pull out, again, it's a theme we keep going back to. It's actions for both individual pets, levers that we can pull for an individual to try to do things for them to get them an outcome. But then, April, you mentioned like these levers that we can pull at the population level, right? So things that we can do for the population as a whole to try to increase the flow through of those animals.
Yeah. Yeah, because when you get to a space crisis point, every single individual matters. Like every space you're able to create. Like I'm not telling anything, anybody anything they don't already know, but like a kennel, like getting one animal into foster can save 3 more, right? Like it's so important to look for every single opportunity and engaging everyone across the organization and helping everybody understand their role within the overall goal of life saving is so very critical. And that's what these that sort of response plan, or just having some, call it whatever you want, but having a plan for how we're going to manage space and rolling that up into your pathway planning overall strategy is so key and important.
I think one pattern that our team has certainly observed, and I'm sure many folks have experienced this, but as your shelter reaches or exceeds that critical capacity, right? Like it feels like everything is on fire and you're running around like crazy. And so just this idea of having that plan, right? So staff know what to do and not feeling like we're just like putting out fires all the time. It's, we know sometimes we're going to approach capacity. We're going to get over capacity. Things will happen. We're at 85%. And then we take in a hoarding case of 100 cats or something like that, right? But just we have a plan, right? We have a plan that we can go to. We don't, not to say it's not stressful at all, but we have that plan to lean on and can start taking action, and it empowers our teams, right? And removes some of that stress.
Absolutely.
Let's see, Jackie, back to just generally obstacles and challenges. Jackie, do you want to share things that y'all have faced at Nebraska and how you approach those challenges?
Yeah, I remember when we first approached the team about just doing rounds and the idea behind it. People looked at me like I was a mad woman. What do you mean? With what time? I have 1,000 things to do and you're adding one more thing that's going to take me up to 2 hours at first. So there was a lot of pushback initially from like when they heard that what rounds even were. And then we took that and we broke it down and we heard their comments, their questions, their concerns, because they were also ours in leadership. And we were able to explain the why behind why this is so important, why they matter, why we're asking them to do this for us, even though we know they have 101 other things to do. And like very much like what April said, just explaining what their part is, a domino effect, but in a positive way. So once they knew what they were doing, that triggered the next action to happen. So even when we are at capacity or what we call like the red zone, you know, there isn't this panic mode. There is internally, but we have a plan. And so we're able to quickly identify what each person in each department needs to do. It's an all for one here because we all have the same mission. We want as many animals to have a positive outcome as possible. And I think, you know, we are such a large organization. We have over 20 departments that, you know, sometimes there would be people in the rounds being like, why am I even here? Why am I part of this conversation? You know, and then we were able to explain how they could impact us. Even if you are in development, like, you matter, because your positive interaction with an animal when you go walk it, because we're at capacity, you know, you're able to advocate for this animal and to explain to a donor what we're doing and what you are doing. And that really just helped make everybody feel empowered to do their part, and understand it. We send an email every day, every morning, explain where we are in capacity, and then again, forecasting. I use that word a lot here at Nebraska Humane because it's very important. And so we do our best to know exactly how many animals are coming in, and what we need to do, whether we're in adoptions, in animal welfare, pathway manager, because the need is never going to stop. We're always going to be here for the animals that need us, but our goal at Nebraska Humane is to always be able to provide that safety net for the animals that truly need us, and then focus on efficiently working through the animals that can maybe quickly move on to the next, you know, home, because we want as many animals as we can to get a positive outcome and have that opportunity, but we can't do it if there's bottlenecks in our system. Or we can't do as many as we want, I guess, if we have bottlenecks in our system. So being transparent about where we are, making sure everyone knows what the plan is, like April mentioned, and like even our animal control officers, we've seen a shift in them because they have access to this information. So they're going to maybe spend the extra 3 minutes to see if someone answers the door or walk the dog around the neighborhood. Our community, you know, our customer relations department is going to spend the extra 2 seconds to explain why they could potentially foster the stray and maybe put flyers up if they can't foster. So all these little things seem like little things, but it's that positive domino effect that really helps us all just move in the right direction together.
Yeah, it's just like April was saying, like that when you're getting close to capacity, every single individual kennel matters, right? Jackie, you brought up, you know, this internal transparency. We actually do have a question that I'll pose to any of the panelists that want to weigh in. But so when we're saying we were talking with our community about capacity for care, how exactly do we do that? Is it only when it's individuals that are, you know, there trying to surrender, or is there some sort of broader communication to the community? And if so, how do you accomplish that?
We just ripped the Band-Aid. We decided we were like, these people need to know it's not just rainbows and butterflies, right? The community doesn't know what we're not willing to share with them. And so they, you know, thankfully, when people thought of us, they thought, you know, this is where pets come for hope. This is where we come for second chances. You know, I came here with my positive experience because I adopted. So they're not necessarily looking or seeing or even understanding. It's not even a thought in their mind that we might be in crisis mode or that we don't have the capacity or that we're understaffed. So we just had an open-ended conversation on social media. We invited the news outlets to come as well. And we said, we want to sit down and just have a conversation. What is capacity for care and what does that mean? Because that's an internal language that we in animal welfare know, but if I were to tell my neighbor I just don't have the capacity for care right now, he'd probably look at me a little sideways and be like, what does that even mean? So sometimes we get stuck in our own lingo, even. And when I hear some of the staff talking, I'm like, hold on, let's explain what that means, right? They don't know what an FTA is. They don't know, you know, just different language that we know, but maybe they don't. So we just brought it down to an elementary level that anyone could understand, and more importantly, anyone could educate somebody else on. And that was really just that domino effect where they're like, oh, did you know that you could foster this stray dog that you found at Nebraska Humane? Bring it in, post the lost and found. They'll give you flyers. They'll give you the crates, things of that nature. And so we have people within our own community now proactively trying to be part of the solution. Not to say they weren't before, they just didn't know exactly how to help. So yeah, I'm a firm believer in ripping the Band-Aid, hosting a town hall, allowing people to come in and ask their questions, because more often than not, it's just that they don't know or they don't understand. They've made an assumption based off the little bit of knowledge that they do have, or maybe we use lingo that didn't make sense to them at first. So allowing that opportunity for Q&A is really helpful.
I love just that you proactively did that communication. You led with it, right? Like if we don't craft our own message and get out there in front of the community, then somebody else will, and it may not be accurate, right? But it gives us the opportunity to create that narrative. Okay, with just a couple minutes left, I'm going to kick it back to Erica, but I just want to say a huge thank you to all of our panelists for sharing their experiences and their tips and their strategies, because we know you all are the ones that are out there doing it, and so I thank you just so much. With that, I will kick it to Erica to wrap us up.
Thank you, Dr. Erin. I will echo that as well. Thank you to all of our panelists for spending your time with us today and sharing your expertise, and Dr. Erin and your team for an amazing series. And so just a couple notes as we move forward. We are going to send out an email as usual, and there's going to be so many resources in it. So we'll have a link to our Trello board that will have those resources. You'll get a recording of this session, and it will also be uploaded to our network partner YouTube channel for you to check it out there as well and share out to your organization for anyone that was unable to make it today. And then I also want to highlight, we will have attached to the email the week 1 through 2 activity sheet. That is what you will submit in order to potentially have the opportunity to receive a $1,000 grant. So highly recommend that you take a look at that and complete it. And if you would like to work with someone from Best Friends, specifically the shelter medicine team, or one of our regional representatives, scan that QR code and you can join our working group to work through that together. But you'll also get an attachment for the daily population rounds workbook. And so we are also welcome to help you with that as well if you would like. So just let us know. And our next series is going to be on community cat programming, which I'm very excited about. So that will be same time next week, August 13th. And we're going to start with the basics of community cat programming. That's going to be a great series. And then I'm also highlighting again our National Shelter Medicine team, which Dr. Erin and Dr. Becca are a part of. If you'd like to reach out to them, they have amazing resources available. All of this information will be on our Trello board as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and have MJ put our little poll up. If you wouldn't mind just filling that out quickly before you head out of this session, just in preparation for that community cat session, so we can get an idea of where you're at currently with community cat programming, would be excellent, and how you enjoyed this series. Otherwise, thank you everyone who attended. We appreciate you checking this out. We appreciate everything you do for your animals and your community. And if you're not a network partner yet, please feel free to register. It's free, and you get a ton of amazing resources and opportunities for grants as well. And again, thank you, panelists. We appreciate you being here. And yeah, thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Bye-bye.